All right. Well, it looks like those participant numbers are kind of evening out. So that is typically the cue to get started. We've got about 45 minutes together today, folks. Welcome to the webinar. We are here to talk early success, not early alert, and how we can use AI to empower your students. All right, well, without further ado, I'm excited to introduce our two presenters today. Two presenters who, of course, need no introduction, but we are joined by our founder and CEO, Ardis, who is a highly accomplished entrepreneur, technologist, and educator. He's got an incredible passion for AI and data-driven solutions, and you're definitely going to see that over the course of the next 40 minutes. Now, as the CEO and founder of Element 451, Ardis has spearheaded the development of our very cutting-edge student engagement and enrollment management platform that leverages AI and predictive analytics to optimize outcomes for higher ed institutions. Ardis's co-presenter today is Daniella Nordin, a senior engagement strategist at Element 451. In this role, she helps our college and university partners optimize Element 451 to meet their enrollment and marketing goals. Daniella also leads our professional services team that delivers transformative solutions in email marketing, content marketing, marketing strategy, and operational efficiency. She brings more than a decade of experience with digital engagement, social media marketing, online fundraising, and more to the team. So with that, Ardis and Daniella, let's get started.
Thanks, Mallory. Wow, Daniella, you should be working at Element.
I was like, she needs no introduction, and then I come right after Ardis. So you're one to talk, my friend.
That's great. That's great. Well, hey everybody, welcome to our webinar today. So we're going to focus a lot on kind of student success today and kind of what that means and some of the new trends and technologies. But taking a step back, when we start thinking about kind of student success, we're thinking about a lot of different things. Like what comes to mind when you think student success, right? For some of you, that might be outcomes. It's like, hey, this person, they got a job, or they basically you're focusing on outcomes. For some of you, you might be thinking engagement. It's like, well, that student is coming to meet with our counselors. They're meeting with faculty. They're going to the library. They're doing all these things. So that's kind of the engagement part of it, and that's part of our jobs. And then some of you also think about retention. It's like, well, retention is a huge part of this. It's like when you think about retention, is like you need student success and retention. Like those usually go hand in hand together because we want to make sure that those students are continuing and finishing. And ultimately, it's about graduation, right? Most of us, like, we want our students to come in, to take our class, to take the classes, to have a great experience, to move on. And those outcomes are usually focusing on graduation and job placement and kind of that fulfilling that mission that we have in our institutions. But technically it's all of the above, right? So that student success really means all of the above. And what you see here in the background, it's actually a mind mapping exercise around what does it take in a regular institution to think about all of the different offices and the different touch points and the signals and everything else that kind of fall under the student success area. And there's a lot, right? There's all these offices, there's testing services, parent networks, there's success coaches, financial aid. So you have so many support systems and offices in there. But when you think about it, it's like, well, it's like, how do you tackle all these different things together? It's like it can be very, very daunting to make an impact. So we usually rely on people at the end of the day, right? We rely on people. We rely on our people that we hire. We have the different offices. We have our different counselors, and really, it's kind of this human in the loop approach that we follow, right? And that's currently, somebody needs to figure out, like, if a student is in trouble, they need to figure out the state of that student, and they have to raise these flags, right? They have to say, hey, this student needs to have some kind of interventions. So, that's a barrier, right? And that's a barrier in terms of achieving success outcomes, but also it's like, how do you act very quickly and timely in a manner that can impact before it's too late for that student, right? So how do you get ahead of things, right? And usually there's these goals of, hey, hey, I have homework assignments, or kind of showing up to class, or getting passing grades, completing semester. Like students, they're not just academic issues that they're having that we need to deal with, but also family issues or outside the institution type issues, right? So essentially, we're in this situation where we are focused on the problem of student success, and it's really around how do we intervene to help that student along. And the current state is around early alerts, right? So we talk about we need to get ahead of that problem, right? We need to identify the circumstances or events or behaviors or lack thereof of those that can provide an early indicator of need for that student, that they're at risk, right? And have the interventions in there and the engagement by the institution. But again, those are very, very highly driven by human touch, right? So it's all driven by human touch. And like, we feel like we're kind of switching, we're switching this like circuit boards, right? Because a faculty member has to raise a flag to tell the counselor that, hey, the student is not doing well in class, but then there is a follow-up. And then, that message needs to get across, but what happens if that person didn't show up to class? So it's like, becomes a really big mess, and it's all driven by humans. And there's a lot of high touch interventions. Of course, like I showed an earlier kind of board in there, but maybe we've kind of graduated and we've gone to more sophisticated digital systems that we are kind of raising these alerts. And a lot of you have these digital systems right now. But what ends up happening is like, well, okay, fine, but what happens outside the classroom? What happens after 5 p.m.? Like we just don't have that connection with that student anymore, and we can't provide that service. You can't provide that interaction. And we know that that's a really, really critical part of it. It's like what ends up happening at that time is very, very important. So then we start thinking about, it's like, well, okay, we can't rely on early alerts anymore because it's just too costly. It's too human driven. It's very expensive for us. And you know what? It doesn't get done right because everybody is very uneven, right, on how we handle that. So we kind of move to this thought process of early success. We need to do better than early alerts, right? We need to have those students receive that guidance at the right time that they need it, in whatever communication channel they prefer and whatever topic they need. And, for some of you, it's like, well, great. Like we're doing some of that stuff. We're implementing technology. We're implementing some chat bots in the past few years in order to help us. Maybe we have some forms that students go in and they report, hey, I need to speak to somebody, or appointments and things like that. But again, it's that technology hasn't really been there, right? You think about a chatbot in the past few years, and they just doesn't have the, like, this can be an example of like that chatbots and the technology that I've been dealing with for the past few years, right? They're trying to be helpful or empathetic, but they just really fail, right? Because they don't understand their language and they can't, they're just not as advanced. And then you have other chatbots that's just like I'm trying to do some work, and but it just doesn't understand that, right? And it just becomes a frustration with technology. And now we are in a place where we have mistrust of that technology, and now we go back to that human, but now the same problems still arise, right? So we think about this in technology world, it's like a technology adoption and how technology is helping us in these two different kind of axes, right? And we deal with other humans in our interactions with these all the time. This is how hardwired we are to interact with other people. The first thing that basically coming out of the caves or even, that's baked into our lizard brain is like when we see somebody else, when we see another, somebody coming towards us, we see, hey, what's their intention towards us? And then what is their capability of committing or accomplishing that intention, right? So it's this notion of technology that we kind of project those same kind of feelings or those lizard brains that come right away. It's like, how warm, or how much can I trust you? And you have that warm kind of axis here. And then the other part is, how competent are you, right? What's your competence? How able are you to accomplish what I need you to accomplish? Because when you look back to those two different bots, right, it's like, well, the first one, it's very warm and it's trying to be very friendly, but it can try to be competent, but it's not, right? It's like, it's just failing at that. And the second one, again, it's like, it can't accomplish anything. So when we think about that, again, it's like our students today are expecting a lot more of us, right? They're expecting those experiences to be a lot better connected with the consumer type experiences that we're having with, with other brands, but the technology hasn't really been there to do that just yet. And again, they are expecting this to be available 24/7. That's the only way that we can kind of help them get there. When you think about it, is like, you need a solution that can be as warm as a companion for you, similar to, for example, this is a poster from a movie, Her. Usually science fiction in movies, it's a little bit of a head of their time, but we traditionally get there eventually, right? So it's kind of a projection of the future state. So in this case, it's kind of this idea that, bots or this AI can be very friendly and can kind of be companions. So we need that warmth. We can get there. And then the other part is, when we look at technology, when we look at these bots, we think about, okay, it needs to do things for us. So Jarvis comes to mind with Marvel Iron Man, where it's actually the AI is able to do a lot of stuff for Tony, right? It's able to accomplish it, be a co-pilot, a co-creator with them, and accomplish a lot of things. So we need both of those different axes, right? We need to be able to communicate in a human natural interaction and be able to be competent. The only one that's in the past few months that most of you have probably known is ChatGPT. And I would say that it's at the top over here. It's both on the natural language and the ability to communicate with it, and then also the competence, right? It's so easy to use that we just talk to it in a conversational way, and it's able to actually give us some really, really good answers when we ask it. It's like, hey, write me this, or give me some strategy, or whatever. So it's the first time that we have seen something, a technology and a product that has shot up, and the usage of it to millions of users, hundreds of millions of users in such a short time, because it's so easy to use and we trust it, and it's actually able to get us what we need. So now, building on top of that, there's this idea of a natural language interface that it's like, great, like we understand people through natural language, so we need to talk to our to our computers, or basically the single pane of glass, through a natural language, right? And then behind it, we need this reasoning engines, right? So it can't be enough where we have these decision trees like the past chatbots, where we have to upload question and answers. We have to have these things predefined. It's like, no. We need decision trees that are actually able to accomplish things and be competent, in order for us and for our students to feel confident that they're able to get what they need. So this is kind of where we are in terms of our technology, and how we can support that student 24/7 with technology that is able to answer their questions, act as a companion, ask as an advisor, do Q&A. And here at Element, we are we've kind of thought a lot about this, and we have Boltbot is really that next iteration of what we feel we can accomplish when we combine these natural language interfaces with the reasoning engines. And then, of course, it needs to be multi-channel, because those students are communicating with you not just on chat. So it can't be a chat bot anymore. It has to be a multi-channel bot. Right? It can be an email bot, an SMS bot, a web bot, a video. So all of these things, all of these different channels need to have the same kind of communication, because it's multi-channel, and it needs to have complete conversations in multiple languages. It needs to be very, very powerful, right? So powered by some of this newer technology and OpenAI. And on top of that, like, this is how, for example, like when I communicate with somebody with text messages, I'm responding to them in a very short short way. And when I'm communicating over chat, I respond to them in a different way. And over email, I respond to them in a very different way. So these are the ways that these bots need to be responding to those students and need to be communicating with them, because that's how we build our trust, right? The channel dictates the mode of communication. The content needs to be kind of personal, not just that, but needs to be personalized, and it needs to have, know who the student is, understand their data, be conversational, and know and remember what happened in the past, and have this institutional data in there, so it can understand and it can be responding to things only for the content and the context that you're in, right? So the idea here is that it understands your data in a more meaningful way, not just keyword searches and return stuff back, but it actually does more semantic kind of data. So it looks at your website, it looks at your internal data systems, and also it looks at your, let's say, knowledge bases that you have, and then it provides that information to them in a more semantic way rather than just keyword like we've done in the past, right? That age is over. Nobody really wants to go there anymore. And if you look at Google, they're moving towards a semantic search and moving towards a large language model, more of this generative AI experience as well, right? So when you think about it, is like, okay, when you're responding to that student, you have these bots need to be able to respond to them in multiple, get data from multiple places, right? From conversation history, knowledge bases. So that response actually is personalized, contains all of the knowledge-based information that's coming from your content, right? And it's not just making it up. And of course, it's personalized to that profile, to that student. And again, it has institutional info in there, right? So it knows where your institution is. It knows your preferences, your style. It knows a lot of things about you. So as we kind of move forward, then it's like, well, damn, like, yeah, of course, it makes total sense. It's like, it needs to be grounded in our content. So it's not like Chat GPT, like you can be using Chat GPT, but then, we have it makes things up, right? So it needs to be grounded in your content. It only answers questions about the content that you provided and your institution. It has a transparent history. So you can still have a human in the loop, right? And that control is available to you, like when that handoff happens, right? That student might say, hey, I just really need to talk to a person, right? So that can hand that off, and then it knows who that student is. So then you can do more automations on the background around it. So anyway, I wanted to kind of focus on that, because that's really how we've been thinking about this future, right? It has to have all these different things, and that's why we're building Boltbot and continue to build it. But that's not enough, right? It needs to empower and have the ability to do stuff as well. So it needs to basically be like Jarvis. It needs to have its robotic arms, and it needs to reach out in different data systems and pull information from there to return that back to the student. So in our case, it's like it needs to start applications, check application statuses, schedule appointments, register you for events, and of course, a lot more, right? So as we're building, check program availability or recommend different programs or classes. So that's all part of like our kind of, I don't say vision, but that is the demand that we understand that students need, and that's what we're building in Boltbot right now. So it needs to be, again, like I'm going to hand it off to Daniella, but it needs to be human. It needs to be digital first rather than human first, right? So we need to move from that in order for us to provide those experiences to those students and to kind of amplify and move away from these early alerts and then kind of be proactive. We need to provide early success. We can't do it by humans, right? That is just impossible. So we have to amplify and we have to become digital first, because that's what our students are expecting from us. So I'm going to hand it off to Daniella, and we're going to go through a few use cases, and she's going to show you a few things on how you can think about it, right? So this is very important, because she's going to go through Boltbot and how that works from a student's experience, but then also go through and say, okay, how do you manage that experience in the background, and how do you have a 360 view of that student so you don't miss anything, even though you might have disjointed components or experiences in your school. And then last but not least, it's also how do you then, be proactive for future work as well, right? So I'll hand it off to Daniella, and she's going to take it on from here.
Thanks, Ardis. Also, I just love a good Marvel reference, and I don't know if anybody out there remembered like what it felt like when we met Jarvis, right? Like I think everybody wanted Tony Stark's like setup, and I don't know if you noticed, you also had like a Vision reference too. So I feel like if anybody like, are you Tony Stark? You can tell us. Like, Ardis, now is the time. Like if you want to in this webinar. So thank you for that. Yes. I'm just a huge Jarvis and Marvel fan, so love to see it. But yes, to follow up and kind of, go on what Ardis is saying here, let's take a look at what that 24/7 student support system looks like. And as Ardis mentioned, we know that human first is unsustainable, right? You're all very good at your jobs, you're all committed to your roles, but no one can be everywhere at once. And you need to know when the right time is to intervene, right? So knowing our students, the hours they keep, and knowing how to meet them at the right place at the right time, these tools become really important, right? So we'll take a look at this scenario here. We've got a student who maybe has been unable to attend class, right? Or maybe they've been missing assignments. They're feeling overwhelmed just by maybe they're a first-gen college student. Before everybody hopped on, I was sharing my experience about being a first-gen college student, how hard that is to navigate, how hard it is to map time management and working full-time, because I still had to work full-time to afford to pay for school. So you've got all these feelings of, being overwhelmed or being lost. And you've also got this sort of shame and embarrassment that comes from not knowing what to do and not feeling prepared, right? And really thinking about the best way to get the information that they need when you're in a sensitive position like this. So for a lot of students, the first place they go is your website, right? And the path that they take looks a lot like this. They're going to start asking questions, and those questions are going to be the freak out questions. How do I withdraw from a class? Are there benefits to dropping a class? What are the penalties? Am I going to lose my financial aid if I drop this class, if I lose full-time status? What's the deadline that I have to make this decision? Can I take the class again? Like, what are the consequences? Based on the questions to those, or based on the answers to those questions, they're going to take certain actions. And I think we really have to be empathetic to these students, because the actions may be based on, situationally where these students are, but they may also be based on emotionally, like what they're figuring out right now, right? And they may want to meet and verify some of the information that they found. Ardis talked a lot about trust and trust in that AI.
Right.
Can you trust everything on the internet these days? So they're feeling vulnerable, and we want to be empathetic to that. And we really want to, and then they want that reassurance. They want that follow-up. Did I make the right decision? Is this the right information? What are the consequences to some of what we're doing here? So we talked a lot about Boltbot. I'll just go ahead and dive right in and talk about how we can offer this personalized, proactive approach.
As Daniella pulls this up, I know Mallory has a really interesting story about this idea of, we're continuously moving forward, and as we interact more and more with systems and kind of interact in a digital world, we're more disconnected than ever, right? And we get anxiety when we have to talk to other people and call them, or even, it's like, I don't know you, so it's like I just tell me, like, leave my food delivery at the door. Like, I don't want to talk to you. So Mallory had a really interesting kind of use case a few years, like when she was on the student success side. And I thought that was very relevant, and that's even amplified now. So Mal, do you want to share that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So what Ardis is referring to, I posted this on LinkedIn as well. I started my career in admissions, and I had just come off of being a very involved student. I was a tour guide. I was working in the admission office every single summer. So I probably gave more than 1,000 tours in my time as a student. And not once did anybody ask me about toilet paper? Right. And I'm curious, I know we've got some admission folks here. Like, how many times do you get asked about toilet paper, right? Probably never. So I started working for the admission office and I was heading up our digital student ambassador team. This is 2008, 2009. And these students were, said, I'd like to respond to questions, from prospective students. And we're finding digital ways to do that. Chatbots were not a thing. Live chat wasn't really even a thing back at that time. So we implemented this Q&A tool. It was just very basic. The student could go into a website, type in a question, we would get it and we could answer it, but it was anonymous. So their name was never connected to it. It was giving them some psychological safety to ask any question under the sun. The number one question, I mean, we got it daily. The number one question people asked about, is there toilet paper in the freshman dorms, or do I need to bring my own?
Yep. I mean, look, we look at it in group settings or even in individual settings. It's like, nobody asks questions. Like those people who ask questions, everybody looks like, what's wrong with you? So even today, though, like there's this psychological safety that happens. And to be transparent, like I see it with myself and my family and my college, how it went. I'm a, first generation immigrant. Kind of my family came here and I came to the US in 99, right? I immigrated here. And as I was going and finding schools, my family was never part of that search or that school kind of experience or going to college or any of that. Like papers came in and they're like, here, you read them or you do whatever you need to do. So they weren't even plugged in. And I had to do a lot of stuff myself, but there was times when, it was just felt overwhelming. Like I had no idea what to do, but I had this pride thing. I was like, you know what, I got to do it myself. I can't ask anybody. It's like, it just felt like, it just wasn't the culture of asking, right? It's like, if you didn't know it, like you were just stupid or you were like, it was just this, stigma against like asking for help or asking people. So I can totally see it. If I wasn't able to do that, I can totally see how, a lot of families or a lot of first generation, a lot of underrepresented, represented populations that are going to college for the first time and they don't have that support, that family support, that support there, like they can really, really quickly kind of fall off. And for what? Because they don't feel safe to ask a question or they feel embarrassed to ask, can I bring toilet paper? But that's not it, right? That's an anecdotal one, but they feel embarrassed to say, hey, is there any other time that I can take this class or I can't make it to class here, or I need to change so all those questions that come up, they just don't know all the options that they have in the question. So I'll let Daniella kind of follow up with some of the technology side, but I felt like this is super important because we're seeing this every day on campuses. We're seeing it every day with just ourselves as well. We're kind of becoming more and more together, but very apart, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely. My real question is, Mallory, what did you do with the information of the toilet paper? Because that's the flip side of this too, right? Is like, we're gathering all this data, we're interacting with students. Tell me you posted somewhere on the website, you do not have to bring your own toilet paper.
And we certainly had our tour guides start to point that out as we walked through the dorms.
Excellent. Good. That's good to hear. Yes. So yes, to really, I just really appreciate the empathy that we're bringing here, because interacting with technology, that psychological safety is a really big deal, right? So I just want to show you some of the power that Boltbot has. I had the screen set up, but you can see it sits on our website. You can start a new conversation. You can see the last conversations that I had plugged in, and I'll show some examples of what I had done before. But you're greeted by Boltbot. We're going back to this student who, is scared maybe about dropping a class and is asking, how do I drop a class? And they would spell it correctly, one. But this could be happening, at midnight, at 1 a.m. Some of the things we have built in, these little indicators here, when Boltbot is working, like that, again, that psychological safety. Hey, you're not just typing into an abyss like right now, right? So we've got some things, on the other other side that says, hey, we're working on it, we're combing our knowledge base, we're really trying to dig the best answer that we can for you. While that's working on it, and I know it'll give me another one, I actually did this a little bit earlier, and I will show you some of the responses we got, because the nice thing about this too is some of these responses are going to be different. It gets smarter as it goes, right? So I asked it earlier, how to drop a class, and the response here is nice because it gives you all of the options, right? You need to officially withdraw. However, this may result in having to pay part or all of your tuition fees. So it's answering that question already about financial services and financial aid, right? Here's the steps to how to do it. Simply not showing up for class does not count as withdrawal. You just can't like stop coming. You have to officially withdraw. And it's important to consider the impact on your GPA before deciding to withdraw the class. So a simple question, how to drop a class, got back a pretty sentient and empathetic answer with multiple considerations, right? Which is really what we want this student. We want to empathize with them, and we want them to see, you know, what their options are. From there, and I'll just go back to you can see this is a different answer. Again, you've got financial aid, GPA, they've gotten this answer, how do I drop a class? Maybe now they're like, okay, I want to meet with an advisor because that gave me a lot of things to consider, right? I've got financial aid to consider, I've got GPA, I've got status to consider. So now they're like, I just want to talk to a person following that path. The nice thing about this is Boltbot comes up, what type of appointment are you looking for? We've got student success planning and admissions interview, FAFSA help, office hours. This is clearly a student success issue. So we'll go ahead and select the student success planning, and then Boltbot will send you back times that these advisors are available, and then you can book directly from Boltbot. So you've sort of warded off, here are the times, yep, and then you can go ahead and click to book. We've sort of warded off that freak out moment for a lot of these students. Earlier today, I also asked it to respond in Spanish, which was really nice. So we talked about the multilingual aspects. So, you know, this was a lot of text to digest in one moment. Maybe you're not, English isn't your first language. So I asked it, hey, can you answer in Spanish? And it gave me that translation in Spanish too. I know Ardis mentioned being an immigrant, a lot of students' parents, English isn't their first language either. So, it's difficult to find that content that you can share with your parents, that paperwork that they need to read. So these are just a few of the ways that Boltbot can help, you know, with that personalized individual support. I'll head back to our slideshow here, and we'll continue to move down our journey and talk about, like, Ardis sort of set up that shift from reactive to proactive. So we've got this student stressed out, has set up an appointment, you know, to meet with their advisor. We really want to flip it back on the other side now and look at what you as a higher ed professional are going to see in Element, or really how you would track this journey. How can you be more proactive about the support that you're actually giving to these students? So we're going to take an early alert case and we're going to turn it into early success. And the example here is really tracking and making sure that your team and that you on the back end are actively monitoring the student and beginning to proactively put those steps in place to get the student on a track to success, right? And a lot of times what that looks like is automated communications, but we want these to be personalized communications. We want this journey and this, tracking mechanism to be easily visualized, right? We want a chart, we want graphs, we want data that shows where the students are and where they need to go. And we want it to work. So we want that success. We want this, our goal really is to create this like supportive, motivating environment for these students. And in Element, what we do is we use something called journeys, and journeys are that, visualization of tracking like sequential interactions. And the sequence is really important here because, as I mentioned before, you want to know where that student is, what they have left, what they've gone through. So I will go ahead and show you all the journey that we have built here too, while I pull up this screen. I saw a question about how many languages Boltbot has now. We're up to like 10, right, Ardis?
No, actually, that's on the translation Copilot side. Boltbot has over 100 plus languages they can respond to. That's a translation service that we're.
Wow. So even I didn't know that 100 plus languages is fantastic.
Add a 0, Daniela. There you go.
Add another 0, right? I was never good at math. That's why I went into marketing. Yeah, I shouldn't say that. There's a lot of math in marketing. So this is the journey in Element. You see we've created an at-risk, low attendance journey. You can jump in here and I'll just kind of give a high-level overview of what we offer. The first thing I want to point out in the settings here is this conversion window. So this is the duration of time that it takes the student to complete the journey, right? And I always like to encourage folks to be aggressive when it comes to student success. So you'll see the way that we've grouped the steps and the interactions in this journey. There's a lot of them, but you all know that it takes a village, right? And you all know how much work it takes to get a student back on track. So be aggressive with that time there. The way we've grouped the journeys here is following that track on that last slide that you just saw. So we've got our automated communications. We've sent out the email that says, hey, you're at risk. You know, we want to meet you in person. So start scheduling those messages. We've got the next grouping here. That's a in-person meeting. So we want to check and make sure that they've scheduled their appointment with their coach, that they attended their appointment with their coach, because that's a big part of it, and that they're on board with this plan that we're moving forward, right? And then we've got groupings of meetings and success plans that happen from that. We've got forms that they need to sign off. We've got more meetings that they need to do. We want to make sure that they're attending those meetings and participating in the plan that we have put forward. And then at the end, we really need their sign off on whether or not this is actually going to work. So this is just a really nice way of seeing, hey, where students are, how many students, of managing and visualizing and tracking if your plans are actually working. And I just want to share a few best practices when it comes to communications too, and just kind of show off a little bit here when it comes to Element. So we've got two types, marketing and transactional. This is a transactional message. This is something that you don't want students to opt out of. So make sure that you mark it accordingly. You can send an email and an SMS text directly from the interface at the same time. So again, to Ardis's point about that multi-channel variation and messages, making sure that you're meeting them where they are. You're using personalization tokens. I read somewhere that there's an open rates increase somewhere from 6 to 10% if you use an emoji and if you use the first name. So if you take nothing else from this, take those two away and hopefully your email open rates will increase. And then a nice call to action to book an appointment. I always get asked inline text versus a button. No harm in doing both, but if you're going to default, always use a button. And that's because you're working with thumb scrollers here, right? And it's a lot easier to click on a big button when you're scrolling on a mobile device than it is to click and pinch inline text. And then the other thing I want to share here is our CC field. So we've got tokens here for different relationships for people who matter in the student's life, right? So we've got, you know, your advisor, if you've got your relationships set up here, high school guidance counselors, you know, parents, if that's really the route that you want to go to, if you've got some helicopter parents. So it's crucial to involve those people who really matter in the student's life in some of these, again, for getting them back on track for success. And then the text message too, just a nice, you've missed 3 classes this month. I'm concerned about your attendance. Let's get you some additional support, book a meeting with me. So just another couple things that everybody that we can share there. All right.
Yeah, that's super important. So one of the things that we are seeing is kind of the inclusion of parents as part of the admissions and enrollment and kind of recruiting process, but also not just that, we've also seen the parents being very, very critical, and kind of that support system, that family helping out when you're in classes and for success as well. So those rates go tremendously higher if you're including that parent. Of course, you have to kind of think about the FERPA components in there, and you have those kind of fields to identify if they have opted in or out on sharing that information or not.
Yes. Yeah, I guess that's a good point, right?
Right, exactly.
Our last use case, I know we've got a couple minutes left, so we'll I'll try to swing through this, but this is really again sort of following the student journey. We're going to take this case from before that had that student that showed low attendance, but instead of looking at it from the student side, we're going to automate those staff assignments for that, proactive outreach to students and track those results. So this is really answering the questions: how do you as the individual delegate this to your team? How are you going to track that the team is doing it? How can you measure what's effective and what's working there? So for a lot of folks, this looks like an automated task, right? So Daniella is responsible for reaching out to this student. You've got your to-do items. Then you've got those folks who are assigned to those to-do items. And then you've got the metrics that you want to actually consider success there. In Element, we do this with something called queues, and they're really dynamic lists. They're based on conditions that you set. You can create it around various business processes. And actually the student success one is just a really textbook use case for using queues, because you can look at tasks related to a specific audience. You can filter by properties. You can do both. But what we did is create this case management task. And I can jump into showing you real quick what this looks like. This is our task module. And you can see that we've got just your regular sort of meetings that are set up. You've got your check-in meetings, meet with your academic success coach. Within each of these, which is really nice, you can already have a description set. So again, instead of saying, hey, Ardis, I need a meeting to talk to you about Mallory's attendance, Ardis can pull up this task and say, hey, I need to meet this student requires regular check-in meetings with these advisors, and then we need to track that progress and adjust the plan as needed. So that's already set up. Our Ardis can hit the ground running on managing Mallory's success there. As they move through this Q2, we actually also have the option of doing subtasks. So develop and implement an improvement plan is a huge task, right? And there's going to be a lot of people involved in that. So you can actually create subtasks, and you can involve other people from your team in managing this subtask field and making sure that they're involved and assigned the right tasks to manage the students at the right time. So I know, 146. I was like, I know we've got some questions coming in, right, Mallory? And I want to make sure we save some time for that. So I will switch over to our slide deck so that we can answer some questions.
Terrific. And while folks are thinking of these questions, please don't forget, pop them in the chat, pop them in Q&A. But I'd love to do a quick promo for our next webinar, which will be on September 12th. And we will be joined by a couple of folks from Forsyth Tech. Of course, we know that attracting and keeping students engaged and enrolled is complicated, right? There's impersonal, generic communications. We have challenges tracking data. There's ineffective technology in the mix. There's a lot of roadblocks to keeping a student engaged. And so our webinar with Forsyth is going to showcase how combining an AI-powered approach with their new student success model actually can really move the needle when it comes to enabling those personalized communications, tracking recruitment success, and helping to build that frictionless experience for students. All right, so as questions are coming in, I will be keeping an eye on the chat, but here we've got a question. Let's see. All right, so Ardis, I think maybe this is a good one for you. Both you and Daniella throughout this session talked about the trust that's necessary in the bot itself. But I think some folks are wondering about privacy and risk, and kind of specifically, you're dealing with students and student information. So what are some of the concerns around security when it comes to this type of technology? And why can't we just keep using ChatGPT to make this all happen?
Yeah, that's a good question. So a lot of organizations right now and a lot of, even enterprises are basically prohibiting people from using ChatGPT or some of the other generative AI tools for sensitive data and for personalizing things. And the reason for that is because that information is now shared, or there's different privacy items that are associated with those products. So you need the data to be in your wherever it already exists, right? In your CRM or in those areas, and then have those tools have these capabilities to generate these emails and so on. So you can't necessarily copy and paste it in there. So there's this security component, because now you're sharing PII information, right? You can't copy and paste. So you have to keep that data secure in your environment where it is, and then start to work from there. And that's the reason why we built Boltbot. The technology underneath is actually using some of the large language model, the same technology that ChatGPT uses, but it's using something very different where the data doesn't necessarily, like it stays in Element, and there is a lot of mechanisms and protections around it. And also one of the other things is around hallucinations, right? We know that ChatGPT, you can ask it a question, it's going to give you an answer no matter what. So we can't trust it, like we can't use it to kind of give answers to students. So we have to guardrail it, and we have to put in the guardrail so it only answers questions that are specific to your institution. So hence another area where you can't just use ChatGPT to build an email or to respond back to a student from a question that they have, because it doesn't have your knowledge, right? That's what we built at.
So for the folks who are asking if a product like this needs to be integrated into their CRM, it sounds like the simple answer here is yes.
Yes. Yeah. You can't just have it be bolted on, right? It needs to be part of the experience and that data kind of living together. Certainly, you can kind of exchange data, but the experience and the personalization is much better and much nicer that way.
Yeah. I know we talk a lot about the challenges of time, right? The time and resource are just two huge challenges. And at the beginning of the session, Ardis, you spoke to, I remember that slide said after 5 p.m., right? Like
exactly.
Think of so many situations where it was a night or a weekend and we would be getting questions from students, because that's when they're sitting on the couch watching The Bachelor, and that's when they're most likely to send those questions in.
Exactly.
So how do you, like a broader, right, with AI in general, how are you seeing folks who are implementing this type of technology kind of regain their time and productivity? And, I'm specifically, we've got some questions around like, hey, I've got people who are handling these questions for me already. Like, it feels like an added investment to have to go buy some technology to accomplish what got some humans doing already.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing that. Look, at Element, we have exactly the same issue. It's like we have, as we're growing our partners, like we need to answer questions around how do I do this or how do I answer it? We have documentation, but nobody goes and reads the documentation. So it's like we have people on our side who are answering those questions. So we are actually using AI on our side too to actually, answer some of those questions, because even though we have people, like people are at very different levels of knowledge, right? And pieces of information or knowledge is kind of hidden in each individual office. So bringing that all together, it's like, I can't ask an advisor or academic advisor to tell me when the food pantry is open or to kind of have, ideas around, I don't know, campus information or particular office, or I don't know if the gym is open or something like that, right? So those don't mix. But however, if you have it in the same knowledge base, that's available and it's available constantly, and it's available at the same, it's able to give those answers very, very consistent and very accurately across all of this institutional knowledge, rather than relying on one person, that person doing their research. Maybe they find it, maybe they're lazy and they don't do all the research, but I don't know. I mean, that's the way we feel about it internally here as well. It's like they're consistent. Machines are really good and consistent at doing that search across and providing finding the right answer.
I was just going to say, I just want to chime in here too and saying the nice thing about having that integrated, this information integrated with your CRM too, is you can look at a student record and see what questions they've asked and who has responded and what they have responded, right? So like if you are losing people, or if there is turnover,
Exactly.
or if somebody's on a different shift, then like you've got this record of how the student interacted and what their concerns are, and you've got this person's, you know, feedback or notes on, or a plan on like what will happen next. So all of this stuff like plays a really big part in that time and that human resource component.
Yeah. And getting back to what Ardis was saying, I remember when I was on the road in admissions, I was having to field so many questions around financial aid. Like I wasn't the financial aid expert. I was the person recruiting students in New York. Like, you know, but and that information changes so quickly that,
exactly.
you know, I never felt like even if I wanted to, that I could keep up with all of it. But because I was on the front lines, I had to answer those questions. I couldn't just say like at a college fair, oh, hey, go call like Sally and financial aid. Like that wasn't the right response.
Exactly. Well, some schools right now are using chatbots already, but it's kind of the keyword based chatbots that we talked about before, the tree based. You have to upload your questions. You have to think about all the different ways that a student or somebody's going to ask those questions, and then you have to provide one-to-one answers around that. So that is very time consuming, and people have to basically go in and just anticipate all those questions, or go in and resolve questions that are not available in the library. But now you start thinking more knowledge bases rather than, you know, actually questions and answers based on keywords. It's like you have knowledge bases. This is the information. You can ask it a million different ways. You're still going to get the same answer. You're still going to get the same information, right? It's like no matter how you ask it. So that's kind of the power of this newer, you know, very, very new technology around large language models and generative AI.
Amazing. All right. Well, folks, I'm not seeing any other questions come in. So with that, we are going to wrap up our time together today. I do look forward to seeing you all in September. I hope you'll get a chance to join us for our next webinar. And I know at the beginning of the session today, too, we mentioned that we're going to be at NACAC. We're going to have a really incredible booth experience there, where we're going to continue to facilitate the learning around a lot of these really important topics and how AI can help to solve some of the really critical challenges that higher education is facing right now. So keep an eye out for us if you're going to be at that conference. It's a little over a month away. But with that, Ardis, Daniella, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us today. Folks, we will get this recording out to you just as soon as it is ready, and we will look forward to seeing you next time. All right. Thanks, everyone.